April 9th, 1731, off the coast of Cuba, a British merchant captain named Robert Jenkins is having a really bad day. Spanish coastal guards have boarded his ship, the Rebecca. They think he's smuggling sugar. They hang him from the mast by his neck 3 times. Then the Spanish captain grabs Jenkins by the ear, takes out his sword, and slices it off. "Take this to your king," the Spaniard says. "Tell him I'll do the same to him if I catch him smuggling." Jenkins picks up his ear. He sticks it in a jar. He pickles it. Then he carries that ear around for 8 years until he gets the chance to show it to Parliament. The result, a 9-year war, about 35,000 dead, battles across the Caribbean, and all because one guy wouldn't shut up about his ear. You're listening to Wait, That Actually Happened, where we prove history is stranger than fiction. I'm your host, author Daniel P. Douglas, and today we're talking about the time Britain declared war on Spain because a guy showed up to Parliament with his ear in a jar. I promise I'm not making this up. Okay, so let's set the scene. The early 1700s were a wild time for international shipping. Spain controlled most of the Caribbean and South America. All that gold and silver from the New World, it flowed through Spanish ports. They were very protective of their trade routes. If you weren't Spanish, you weren't supposed to be trading with Spanish colonies. Period. But here's the thing about British merchants. They didn't care about Spanish rules. Smuggling was big business. You could make a fortune sneaking goods into Spanish ports: sugar, slaves, manufactured goods. If it was valuable, British ships were carrying it. Spain's solution? The guardacosta. That's Coast Guard in Spanish. These weren't your friendly neighborhood lifeguards. They were heavily armed patrol boats with permission to stop and search any ship they wanted. If they found contraband, they could take everything: the ship, the cargo, sometimes even the crew. The British hated this. They said the Spanish were pirates. The Spanish said the British were smugglers. Both were probably right. By 1731, tensions were high. British merchants wanted protection. The Spanish wanted the smuggling to stop. And caught in the middle was Captain Robert Jenkins, sailing his ship Rebecca from Jamaica to London. Jenkins was probably smuggling sugar. The Spanish definitely found some. What happened next would become the most famous ear in British history. So, here's what went down. On April 9th, 1731, Captain Jenkins and his crew were sailing near Havana when they spotted a Spanish patrol boat, the San Antonio, commanded by Captain Juan de Leon Fandino. Fandino was apparently in a very bad mood. The Spanish boarded Rebecca and started searching. They found sugar, contraband sugar. This was bad news for Jenkins. What happened next depends on who you ask. According to Jenkins, the Spanish went crazy. They tied him to the mast. They hung him by his neck 3 times, dropping him down the hatch each time. They threatened to set his ship on fire. They looted everything valuable. Then came the ear. Captain Fandino grabbed Jenkins by his left ear. He took his sword and sliced downward. Some accounts say he cut partway through, then someone else ripped the rest off. Either way, Jenkins ended up holding a chunk of his own ear. Fandino reportedly said, "Take this to your king. Tell him I'll do the same to him if he dares the same." Bold words from a guy who would never actually meet King George. Jenkins and his crew limped back to England. He reported the incident. Officials wrote angry letters to Spain, and then nothing happened for 7 years. Here's where it gets interesting. Jenkins kept his ear. He pickled it, and he carried it around, showing it to anyone who would listen. Look what those Spanish monsters did to me. By 1738, relations between Britain and Spain were even worse. Politicians who wanted war started looking for excuses, and they found Robert Jenkins. In March 1738, Jenkins was called to testify before Parliament, or at least that's the story. Some historians say he was actually at sea that day and couldn't have been there. But whether he showed up in person or not, his story got told. Picture the scene: the House of Commons, angry members demanding action against Spain, and somehow Jenkins' pickled ear becomes Exhibit A. When asked what he did when his ear was cut off, Jenkins supposedly replied, "I commended my soul to God and my cause to my country." That quote was perfect: patriotic, religious, dramatic. It spread like wildfire. Newspapers printed it. People repeated it in pubs. "I commended my soul to God." Jenkins became a symbol of British honor being trampled by Spanish brutality. Prime Minister Robert Walpole didn't want war. He'd kept Britain out of major conflicts for years. War was expensive. War was risky. But the public was furious. The press was furious. His political enemies used Jenkins' ear to attack him. One famous cartoon from the time shows Walpole fainting at the sight of the pickled ear. It was everywhere. On October 23, 1739, Britain officially declared war on Spain. Church bells rang throughout London. People celebrated in the streets. One observer noted that they rang the bells now, but would wring their hands later. He was right. The War of Jenkins Ear, as it became known, started out great for Britain. Admiral Edward Vernon attacked Portobello in Panama with just 6 ships. He captured it in 24 hours. Britain went wild. They wrote songs about Vernon. They made medals. The famous song Rule Britannia was written around this time to celebrate. But then came Cartagena. In 1741, Britain assembled a massive invasion fleet to attack Cartagena de Indias in present-day Colombia. We're talking nearly 30,000 men and almost 200 ships. It was one of the largest naval operations in history up to that point. It was also a disaster. The Spanish commander, Blas de Lezo, had maybe 3,000 defenders, but he was smart. He delayed the British long enough for the wet season to arrive. Tropical diseases tore through the British forces: typhus, dysentery, yellow fever. Soldiers were dying faster than the Spanish could kill them. The fight lasted 67 days. When the British finally retreated, they'd lost about 18,000 men, most to disease, not combat. They also lost 50 ships. Here's a fun fact. Among the American colonial volunteers at the battle was a young man named Lawrence Washington. He survived. When he got home, he renamed his Virginia plantation Mount Vernon after Admiral Vernon. Lawrence's younger half-brother would later inherit that plantation. His name, George Washington. Yes, that George Washington. The father of America lived at a house named after a commander from the War of Jenkins Ear. The war dragged on for 9 years. It merged into the larger War of Austrian Succession. More battles, more deaths. By the time it ended in 1748, about 30,000 British and 4,500 Spanish had died. And the result, the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, basically said, let's pretend this never happened. Both sides went back to how things were before the war. Status quo ante bellum, as they say in Latin. Everything returned to normal. 35,000 dead, 9 years of fighting, billions in today's money spent, and nothing changed. All because of one guy's ear. You know what's wild? We still do this. Not the ear-cutting part, hopefully, but the part where we use small incidents to justify big wars. That happens all the time. The Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964, the USS Maine in 1898, Iraq's supposed weapons of mass destruction in 2003. History is full of moments where an emotionally charged narrative driven by political interests was used to override diplomatic caution and justify military action for broader strategic goals. Jenkins Ear wasn't really why Britain and Spain went to war. It was about trade, about empire, about money and power. But you can't rally a nation around, we want their shipping routes. You can rally them around, look what they did to this poor man's ear. Social media has made this even easier. A single video, a single image can turn into an international incident overnight. We're all walking around with the modern equivalent of Jenkins' pickled ear in our pockets. Our phones can capture any outrage and share it with millions. The lesson from Jenkins' ear is that we should look at who is telling us to be angry about injustice and why. Those politicians in 1738 didn't care about Jenkins. They cared about trade deals and political power. The ear was just a prop. Imagine if the Jenkins Ear incident happened in 2025. First, there would be video, multiple angles. Someone would be live streaming. Oh my God, they're cutting off his ear. Hit that subscribe button. Within hours, hashtag Jenkins Ear would be trending. Politicians would post their outrage. This attack on our citizen will not stand. Cable news would have wall-to-wall coverage. The ear crisis, day 47. Jenkins wouldn't need to pickle his ear. He'd post photos of it, before and after shots, maybe start a GoFundMe. Help me get a prosthetic ear and sue Spain. Someone would definitely sell Justice for Jenkins merch. T-shirts with ear designs, bumper stickers, those car fresheners shaped like ears. And somewhere, a historian would tweet, you know, there was a war about this once. It lasted 9 years and accomplished nothing. Nobody would listen to that historian. They never do. So that's the War of Jenkins Ear, when Britain went to war because a sea captain wouldn't stop showing people his body parts in jars. 35,000 dead, 9 years of fighting. And in the end, everything went back to exactly how it was before. As for Robert Jenkins, he actually did pretty well for himself. He became a governor in the British colonies. Not bad for a guy mostly famous for losing an ear. Next time, we're exploring Operation Acoustic Kitty, when the CIA spent millions of dollars trying to turn cats into spy listening devices. Spoiler alert, cats make terrible spies. They kept wandering off to chase mice. Be sure to check out my Substack Intelligence Bulletin from author Daniel P. Douglas for more podcast series, written articles, and links to my books. Thanks everyone for listening. Have a memorable day.